Lawyer for the Trayvon Martin family and defense attorney John Burris. He was Rodney King's attorney during the civil trial of the police officers involved in his beating. He's also referred numerous cases to the Justice Department for federal review. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Attorney Crump, what is next for the Trayvon Martin family? First of all, how are they doing, and are they considering a civil lawsuit against George Zimmerman?
Well, Reverend Sharpton, obviously they were heartbroken, like so many across the country and across the world when that verdict was handed down. And to quote Sabrina, Trayvon's mother directly, she cried, she prayed, she cried some more. She got up and went to church, and then when she got home, she said, Attorney Crump, we will not let this verdict define Trayvon Martin. We will define the legacy of Trayvon Martin. And it was inspiring, Reverend Sharpton, to say the least. She said, we've come a long way. Now we have to roll up our sleeves and work even harder to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else's child, especially now that this verdict has been handed down.
You know, over a year ago, you and I and others had talked about the federal government looking into not only this case, but the stand your ground laws. We had a meeting with the U.S. attorney right there in Sanford, Florida. This is nothing new like the media is trying to play. And it was always a commitment of this family to deal with issues that were the large issues in this as well, so this would not affect other children, what they go through. And I remember Ms. Fulton saying all along, I can't bring Trayvon back, but we've got to change society, whether it's gun laws, stand your ground laws, and other things, that this is happening every day to children.
Yes, sir. And I'm so glad you have my good friend and mentor, John Burris, on, because this question has evolved. And it was and still is at the foundation of equal justice question, Reverend Sharpton, but it has evolved now to one of equal protection.
Right.
Because anybody who observed that trial know that the proposition of the defense was that because there had been a burglary by an African-American teen, that this neighborhood watch volunteer with a 9mm gun was somehow justified in profiling and following Trayvon Martin based on the way he looked. So the question has been framed now for our Justice Department, is this the law? Is this that you can profile our children and follow them, take the law into your own hands? Because we need to know what to tell our children. And if it is not the law, then a federal civil rights violations should be brought against the killer of Trayvon Martin, so people will know that you can't do this. The United States Supreme Court says police can't profile based on race. So how can a citizen with a 9mm gun profile our children?
Now, Attorney Burris, when you look at precedents of federal civil rights cases, and you and I both have been involved in these, Rodney King beating, we saw an acquittal in a state court. 4 police officers were acquitted on state charges. Then they were tried on civil rights charges, and they were convicted. 2 police officers were convicted of federal civil rights charges after they were acquitted. And there are other precedents that we have seen. So this is something that is not only possible, but has had a precedent in the past, while people are acting like this is something that is unthinkable. It has, in fact, happened and has succeeded in happening.
Absolutely. First, let me compliment you on your comments. I think people need to know that this is not the end. This is just the beginning, and it's a forward march for progress, and we all need to participate. And certainly, Ben, you've done a wonderful job in marshaling your family. I really appreciate the work that you guys have done. Let me just say, though, the issue that people talk about around here that you will hear as a negative is this is double jeopardy if you were to prosecute it. It is not double jeopardy, because the federal statute has different elements and different causes of actions that apply that do not apply in state court. So you can, in fact, have a separate federal cause of action that's separate and apart from a state case, even if there's been an acquittal. We saw that in Rodney King, and there are a lot of other cases that I've been involved involved in as well. So it can be done. I mean, the issues around the federal prosecution obviously is a challenging one. I do believe the big issue in this case was racial profiling, and there's the issue that we've been talking about for a number of years and trying to get the Senate to do something about, because racial profiling, when you substitute race for probable cause or suspicious conduct, you can get yourself into trouble, and young black kids need to know this could happen to them. But from our point of view, going forward, there were two issues to consider from Sanford. One, did the police department itself have a practice, discriminatory practice of not protecting black African Americans? And then secondly, whether or not this was based upon race. And one can make the argument that because there have been 42 other calls or thereabouts of all African American males, that he has a state of mind to look to prosecute and to go after African Americans. That could be the first element of the offense that needs to be looked at by the Justice Department.
42 other calls. Attorney Crump, pattern and practice of Sanford Police, the stand your ground laws, whether or not they violate civil rights, state law does not supersede federal law. And one of the things that we are looking at here in terms of the Justice Department is the broader question of the state law itself. Ironically, there was a law against racial profiling in the state of Illinois done by a man named Barack Obama when he was a state senator. So when we look at these state laws and we look at how they're applied, the federal government can look at the state laws, but we also need to deal with the state laws in Florida and other states that have set up situations that come back to haunt us. It's unimaginable that you have one set of laws in Florida, another in New York, another in Pennsylvania. I think we've got to discuss all of that as we deal with the outcome of this case.
Well, from my point of view, that what you have to look at is how is this law being applied? Is it being applied, stand your ground laws? Is it being unlikely that the prosecutor, the defense, is being allowed for cases involving white defendants or not, versus that of black defendants? And so you want to see the discriminatory application of this particular law.
Pattern and practice. Attorney Crump?
Yeah, I agree, and it is certainly not lost that even though his killer profiled him, the Sanford Police Department seemed to have profiled Trayvon as well, because they took his killer's version as the gospel when they got out there on that scene. So it is troubling to many around the country when they say, why can't we get equal justice? Why couldn't they have looked at it fresh and clean? And then even as they considered whether to bring a prosecution, it seemed to always be the killer's perspective, and it was never a perspective of the victim. And that is really troubling, and that's why so many people are protesting. That's why so many people are disappointed with the verdict. And Reverend Shopton, I want to say, as you have said all along, we wanted to have the trial bought. We respect the rule of law, and we want everybody to remain peaceful. However, at the onset, we did ask for the Department of Justice. We wanted the federal government involved and not the local government doing this case, because we understood that they had already had some issues from the onset that was troubling with dealing with the tragic death of Trayvon Benjamin Martin.
Now, I might also add that you never called and the family never called on people to come in, and you called me until the local authorities had said there would be no arrest. This was not something that you wanted or anyone wanted to have to make a situation that it became. You know, people act like people just jumping all over this situation. I think the family wanted justice, and when they felt they had to get a lot of spotlight and national attention and rallying on it, they did it as a last resort. For a couple of weeks, no one knew or did anything about this.
Absolutely. And Tracy and Sabrina have only wanted what any other parent would want if that was your child shot in the heart. They didn't want anything extraordinary. They just want simple justice. The killer of their unarmed teenage son to be held accountable, and their son's death not to be in vain. And that's why they are continuing to fight. And I am happy Attorney Burris said what he said. I'm happy you've always said what you said. This is going to be a long struggle, and Sabrina and Tracy are committed, and we pray that you all continue to stand with them in this fight, because they can't bring Trayvon back. It really is about your children now.
Attorney Burris, quickly, does this have to be a hate crime for the Justice Department to proceed?
I think it has to be a hate crime based upon race. I mean, ultimately, it's race that's at issue here. So you have to have animus toward this person because of his race, and that is the basis upon which you kill them, and so the question here is, how do you prove that? Because that's just the first step. Then you have to have significant evidence, and there's obviously an overwhelming state interest involved here, a federal interest, because you can't kill somebody based upon their race and not the government have some interest in it. So then the question is, what evidence is it of that? And that's what I think the government has to really look at the facts to see more about his prior history and his calling. Look at these individual cases that the other 42 calls to see what facts were there and how similar are they to those of Trayvon Martin, and the fact that caused him to use him suspect when it really was a code word for black.
Benjamin Crump, John Burris, thank you both for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.